Hey guys, Ark here, bringing to you Chapter 1, Episode 5 of my Learning Night Elf series. The first 4 episodes were dedicated to build orders, and this is going to be the first non-build order episode. So in this episode, we're going to be covering build layouts. So what this means is, where do we want to place our buildings to give us the biggest benefit? So for the purpose of this episode, we're going to focus strictly on Night Elf vs. Human and Night Elf vs. Undead. The reason why I'm combining these two is because my build layouts personally are very similar for the matchups. Both play very similarly in their dealings with Night Elf typically, so that's generally why I build the bases that I do. Keep some things to keep in mind is that this is going to be dependent on your goals. What are you trying to defend against? Me personally, this is just what I've found to work the best in dealing with the harassment or early game harassment as well as late game harassment. So I'll give you kind of the thought process behind where certain ones go. It's totally okay if you do things differently. These aren't strict guidelines by any means. This is just, again, what I've personally found to help me out a lot. So I already have a game loaded up. We're going to be finishing out the rest of it. You can kind of see the altar and the moonwell right here. So generally what I try to do versus human and versus undead is to defend against early game harassments. I like to have a lot of pathways for my archers to run. Footmen and ghouls can run through the same pathways that archers can, and so that's why it's very important to give them the most mobility as possible to kind of escape from them. So what I always try to do is have generally a larger opening between my altar and moonwell. I always put my altar on the spot that I'm going to run to first. So if I'm going to run the direction right through here, right once my hero finishes, I always put my altar on that side. If I was going to run down, I would put my altar down on the other side. Other thing to keep in mind is that you want to have multiple pathways in and out of your base. You never want to get trapped into your base and then just have to block off one exit for you. At that point, all your archers are going to die if that were to occur. The other thing I try to do is create a pathway around my tree of life. It's not the biggest thing that you have to worry about in this matchup, but especially against Orc, which we'll get to in a little bit, having a pathway around a high damage dealer like the tree of life is very important. So for now, that we're going to leave it at that since we're just at the 2 buildings, and I'll explain the rest as we play the game. So I've already started teching, and I'm just building resources, so this is not a normal game by any means. All I want you to focus on is the build layout. So kind of the idea is that early game, this is going to be very helpful in defending against harasses. The reason being is that I have multiple pathways for my archers to run. Normally I'd have a second moonwell already complete at this point, to keep that in mind. And you already can kind of see that what I'm trying to do is basically create a large barrier around my base. The moonwells I like to have further out of my base, because oftentimes a human or an undead will take the fight to your base. And so the further out your moonwells are, the first of all, it allows those moonwells to be closer to the battle. So if your battle is happening right here, you don't have to run very far to heal. The other thing it does is it creates kind of a barrier. So if his units try to run past here, some of the damage might get soaked up by the moonwells. But what it'll also do is it'll break up his army too, so it'll make it easier for you to focus fire. So what I'm going to do is basically finish off this layout. I would try to keep a couple pathways in and out between these. I'm going to build the Hunter's Hall to completely close off this left side here. What this basically does is any melee units are forced to kind of run through this pathway here, and it gives a nice little pocket for my range units to kind of fight from with a lot of defenses in mind. So next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to build a shop right here. The shop I like to have further out while still being protected by the moonwells. The reason being is, again, because the fights happen right outside your base. So the closer your shop can be, might give you an advantage in the battle. So the other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to just kind of finish off this layout. I like to keep at least 2 openings in and out. This would be one path, or this would probably be one pathway I wouldn't want to close out, but it's totally okay if you want to. I think I'm actually going to put the moonwell right here. From a building perspective, I like to have multiple in and outs, but I also don't want to have only 2 pathways. So this just gives another pathway for a unit to run out of. So I just hit tier 2, so I'd be placing my lore unit or lores right now. And I like to have them further in the back of the base. The reason being is the human and undead will oftentimes come in and try and cancel your tier 2 buildings. If that were to occur, what they would have to do is they'd have to run past my shop, my tree, as well as into my base to actually do damage to it. So during that time, my Tree of Ages is doing 49 to 60 damage, 21 to 25 from the Wonders, and they're also putting themselves at a very high risk of either having to teleport out or losing a lot of units. So as you can see, this is pretty much the end of what the base layout would look like. It's relatively safe from a defense standpoint. They have to run through the trees like I mentioned. It also allows us to take fights right outside of our base with an easy access to the shop or the Moonwells. The third thing that it does that I didn't really touch on is because they take the fights to you oftentimes, a lot of times you get trapped inside your base. And what makes it difficult once you get trapped inside of your base is actually getting outside, pushing them away and moving outside your base. Because of our layout is so open, it gives us a lot of pathways to run units out, and it prevents our units from getting clumped up, and it prevents them from just having a concave right around the base and focusing units as they funnel out. So this gives us a lot of maneuverability and ability to get outside of our base. So there you have it. That's my Night Elf versus Undead and Human build layout. You'll see this pretty much follows suit on almost every map, almost every game that I play against Night Elf or play against Undead and Human. Now this kind of works for lore units, but you can, if you happen to go Winds, Ancient of Winds, or do something else, I still try to follow this general concept, just because that's what I found works for me. Totally okay if you want to do something differently. It's not, like I said, it's not concrete rules, but just some guidelines to keep in mind, and this is how I do mine. So with that said, the next episode I'm going to be taking a look at the versus Orc matchup, and have a good day, everyone.